It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the black car pulled up in front of the big house. Peter could see from a distance the people bustling about, bringing things in and out of the house. The man smiled contentedly. The house had been finished last year, but there was no money to finish it. But 3 months ago, Peter managed to sell his parents' old house in the village, and with the proceeds, he and Pam decided to finish the renovation and move into the new house. At first, Peter didn't want to sell his parents' house. The memory of his recently departed parents still rubbed his wounds. His father had been ill for a long time. After his death, a couple of months later, his mother passed away. But suddenly, there was a buyer, and Peter decided that perhaps this was how fate was supposed to work out and agreed to sell his parents' house. Pam was very happy about it. "Peter, why did we build this house? Why did we put so much into it that it's just standing there?" his wife said to him. "Pam, you didn't want to leave our apartment. You were the one who didn't want to leave our apartment." "You didn't say that," her husband looked at her reproachfully. "I don't know what I said, maybe I changed my mind," she said. "No, besides, I've had enough of our 38 square meters." 2 weeks ago, Peter found a crew rumored to be very good guys and work on the interior of the house boiled over. The only thing is that the owner of the house was constantly busy at work. He rarely let go early. So Peter's wife was now in charge. "Hi, Pam," my husband walked in. "How are things going here?" He looked around the rooms with interest. "Yeah, well, you see," she went into the small room with the bedroom. "We have already sorted out here. You can say it is already a clean version. The kitchen and bathroom will be the most problematic." "What's wrong with them?" Peter was surprised. "Communications will be difficult to bring in." "No," Pam sighed. "You know how much you have to put into this place. By the time they get all these findings done, they'll have the bathtub and sink in place anyway. Just like I wanted to move in here in a month." "Then we're not going to make it," she said with annoyance in her voice. "Yes, I told you about it right away," confirmed the husband. "It's not like wallpaper here. You have to do everything, and the walls should be leveled and put the radiators and arrange the floors. So it is still unknown that it is faster to put a box or to deal with interior finishing and communications." The man went outside with his wife. Peter had to get back to work. "Pam, how are you doing?" Her husband looked at her with concern. "I was told that I can count on a 2-week vacation only in 3 months." "That'll do," the wife replied tiredly. "Someone has to do all this. Besides, I don't carry buckets of mortar. I just manage." She smiled and kissed her husband goodbye. She went back into the house. "Is the weather going to turn bad?" Peter muttered, looking out the window. The trees outside the window began to sway from side to side. The husband was pleased. Soon he and Pam were going to move to a new house. It was a big deal to Peter. He was tired of working at the vacuum factory. And lately, he wanted more and more often to settle down in his private house, start a small farm, and leave his factory for good. Not only was the salary increase delayed for several years, but there had been constant problems with the supply of materials. "I'll leave," Peter said LLY. "When the house is finished, I'll quit this vacuum. I have no more strength for it." Peter bought the land many years ago. You could say it was his wedding present to Pam. As a boy, Peter wasn't exactly attracted to the female sex. For as long as he could remember, he'd always been attracted to machinery. So when his friends had their first romance, the guy was covered in fuel oil, picking at his father's old tractor. And then the army, and there and again the technique. After the army, Peter enrolled as a mechanic at the college. Many young men from his village had already married, but Peter was still studying science. He never found a girl to his liking at the collective farm. Then he gave up and went to the city. His parents didn't mind. And so it went on year after year. And when Peter realized he was already 31 years old, that's when he started to think that it's time to settle down. He'd had enough of being a bachelor. There was a woman named Pam at the vacuum plant. She was 3 years older than Peter. The man began to notice that she was looking in his direction. At first, he was intimidated by her, and then one day he asked Pam out on a date. The woman was divorced by then and had a daughter from her first marriage. So what? Peter thought at the time. It's my own fault. All the normal girls have long since been taken. I shouldn't have dragged it out so long. It's not to say he was head over heels in love with Pam after the date. He was probably driven by pragmatism and a desire for something new. Over the years, Peter had grown quite bored with technology, and he wanted a change. So the man thought that Pam was the most suitable candidate for this purpose. They had been dating for probably 3 months. Peter had already been to Pam's house. Anyway, he ended up proposing to the woman, so to speak. He didn't have his own apartment at the time, so it was decided that Peter would move in with Pam, and eventually, they would build a house with the money that the young man collected. He immediately bought a plot of land on the outskirts of the city. Pam's apartment was very small. She got it from her aunt, who lived alone. She had no children, and when she became ill, Pam moved in with her and had her looked after. But fortunately, Olivia, the woman's daughter, turned out to be a very quiet girl. She grew up safely and married at the age of 20. And when Olivia went to her husband, Peter and Pam, as they say, lived and lived. But they felt so tired of their apartment that they used all the money Peter had saved to build their own house. Pam had given up the factory for the last 2 years, and that made the man even more anxious to get the house finished quickly. It was hard to tell how Peter and Pam lived. Peter had nothing to compare it to, so it seemed fine to him at the time. They had long since grown accustomed to each other, and they hardly ever had any conflicts or scandals. Peter always thought that as soon as they moved into their own house, then he and his wife would finally meet in the same room every day. Over the years, they got tired more and more often. The man spent time in the kitchen. It's not far from divorce, Peter's friend Mike, who worked with him, once joked. A husband and wife must have some interest in each other, Mike. But we are, as they say, we live soul to soul, do not quarrel, Peter justified. Peter, I'll tell you something, I, for many years, adhered to the generally accepted view that the first time you can meet your man, and bang, you have love forever. The locksmith shared his experience. And when Natalie and I lived for 10 years, such a fatigue came over me. She was a good hostess and a caring mother, but at one point, it came to me that I looked at her, and she was a stranger to me, Peter. I swear to God, I never looked at anyone else, but it was as if she and I had outlived our time. And immediately there was a void. I started watching Natalie, and she didn't pay any attention to me either. I can see she's in pain, Andrew. I was 10 years old. I don't want to live together anymore, and divorce is a shame because we have children and there are no external reasons. We lasted another 3 years. I feel well, it's really unbearable. I don't even want to go home. I plucked up courage and decided to talk to Natalie. I told her everything that was on my mind. She's sitting there not saying a word. I'm shaking inside, but I guess I didn't do it for nothing. I only hurt Natalie. She didn't say anything for a long time, and then I guess she made up her mind. I'm sorry, but I don't love you, she said quietly and turned away. A stone fell from my soul. You have no idea how relieved I felt. She and I divorced by mutual consent. We tried to explain everything to the kids together. Natalie never forbade me from talking to them, and now they come to visit me. So divorce isn't always a bad thing, you just have to get to that point. And then I met Lee. We've been together for over a decade, Peter. And I'll tell you, I don't get tired of her, I don't get bored with her. Even though Lily and I don't have kids, we have fun together. I don't even know what to tell you, Peter sighed. I've been feeling more and more that maybe Pam isn't the right person for me. But then you remember that she and I are moving into our house soon, and I just feel like things are going to work out for us. You do whatever you want, but as I realized, some people subconsciously start to have lovers so that all this came out, and they could divorce their husbands or wives, Mike replied. I've seen a lot of these situations. So after divorce, almost 99% of ex-husbands or wives break up with their lovers. I think it is such a psychological mechanism. When you do not love a person and can no longer live with him, then you look for a reason to divorce, and some people, not all of course, get someone on the side. Otherwise, what's all this for? If you love a person and you enjoy being together with him, you will never think of divorce. The words of his friend somehow echoed in Peter's soul, and he spent the whole day thinking about it and tried his best to be honest with himself. I just have to answer one question. Do I love Pam? He asked himself and immediately tried to answer. Well, she and I live well, we don't fight, and besides, we're getting a house soon. No, that won't do, he yelled at himself. Do I love Pam or not? Can I answer that damn question honestly? Something began to rise to the surface of his consciousness, and the man felt an intense fear. Peter became agitated and decided not to ask himself that question again. From that day on, he focused entirely on the house. The man realized that he did not belong to those daredevils who are ready to pick themselves and look at their inner pain. Peter wasn't capable of that at the time. The man went back to work. He had another hour to finish his business. After work, he drove towards his house again. It was almost 7 when he stopped near the temporary fence. Pam was already waiting for him. Shall we go? She said tiredly. Peter, let's stop at the store. We need to get some groceries. Pam, do you love me? Suddenly her husband asked and looked at the woman carefully. Peter, what kind of a stupid question is that? She answered him reproachfully. At our age, such questions are no longer asked. Come on, let's go. Peter wanted to object, but pretended to cough. His wife looked at him unhappily. They drove back in silence. Each of them was thinking about something else. Peter looked at Pam with a sidelong glance. She was smiling at something. Pam, what are you doing? Her husband asked in bewilderment. Did something happen? He inquired. No, it's nothing, replied the wife. It's just that the guys we got are fun. They have time to work and joke. Well, that's good, the man smiled. So they do not let you get bored. The main thing is that they do their job well. Yeah, I'm not even worried about that. The guys are good. Their foreman is so smart. He knows all the ins and outs so well. It's a sight to behold, as they say, Pam assured him. Peter, you don't have any Shabbos there, suddenly my wife asked, because we will not have enough money. We have to put up the fence too. I don't know, the husband answered without much interest. Pam, I'm so tired of working without a day off. I thought we'd do the house so I could get some rest. I can't wait to get this done so I can quit. Peter, what are we going to live on? His wife looked at him in shock. You're going to have to invest more in your house, Pam. I can't do all this on my own, Peter replied in bewilderment. Let's sell your apartment. No, she answered immediately. What if we need money later, and we don't have it? Well, let's start a farm and do it together, the man suggested. Peter, are you out of your mind? His wife looked at him in surprise. We didn't build the house to dig in the mud here. Don't even think about it. Well then, why do we need all this? The man got angry. You do what you want, but after we move into the house, I'm going to quit my job and go into the poultry business. Pam gave her husband an angry look, but didn't answer him. She stared out the window and didn't speak again the whole way. This isn't going well, Peter thought to himself. Maybe there's no feelings between us, and it's time we did something about it. What about the house? The man reasoned. I've put so much effort into all this, and now I'm left with nothing. He was experiencing a strong inner resistance. Peter felt very tired. There were times when he would work for months at a time without a day off. He had a traditional schedule at work, and on Saturday and Sunday, he also fixed cars. Yes, and in the evenings too. So he had high hopes for his house. He thought it would be like retirement. He wouldn't have to work anywhere else, and finally, Peter could do something he dreamed of for years. In fact, he wanted to go into poultry. Whether it was chickens or geese, he didn't care. He envisioned raising small chicks into adults and selling them. They had almost 15 acres of land, so his plans looked quite realistic. Another week passed, and Peter began to notice Pam pressuring him more and more about money. Pam, he finally couldn't take it anymore. But you can work too. You can see it's hard for me to do all this on my own. Do you think I lie on the couch and watch TV all day? His wife resented. My constant cleaning and cooking are not work, is it? It's the hardest work. Moreover, I'm already exhausted with the house. I don't have the energy for anything else. So we'll start living with a temporary gate. That's what the husband suggested, and then when we have enough money, we'll finish the rest. Well, how do you imagine it? His wife looked at him in shock. There is such a beautiful house, and he has incomprehensible boards instead of gates. Nothing. We'll be patient. Peter was angry. We built it for ourselves after all, not for others. Pam snorted and turned away. Lately, Peter had noticed that they were at odds about the house. Maybe we shouldn't have built it, he thought to himself. Pam and I were fighting about it all the time. The man had been gray as a cloud for the past few days. His wife hadn't spoken to him in days, and the reason was that he wouldn't take the job now, and she needed a new gate. Peter, look at the whole thing from the outside, Mike tried to calm his friend. The box was built entirely at your expense. You worked hard for almost 2 years to raise that money. Pam hasn't worked anywhere for more than 2 years, and the interior decoration is also at your expense, is that right? That's right, so you'd say the house is all yours. Well, I've lived in her apartment for years. The man started trying to come up with counter-arguments. I didn't have a place of my own when I moved in. Okay, well, the free and reasonable, you live in her apartment, you work and give her all the money. Tell me, the money you earned at the factory and from time to time did Shadbush, you would be enough to rent an apartment and provide for yourself. I think so. The man looked at Mike with an uncomprehending look. What's your point? That's what I'm getting at. Then it turns out that the money you would have given to rent an apartment, you gave to Pam. But the money you could have spent on yourself, you gave to her. I'll tell you something else. If you lived alone, you'd still have money left over, so you could have been scraping together something for yourself. So what you're saying is that I've actually been paying Pam for her place all this time, is that it? Peter scratched his head. Exactly, smiled his friend. Okay, let's be honest. Women do all the housework, they get tired of it. But nowadays, a woman can't not work unless her parents are millionaires. And so try to survive on one salary, it is simply impossible. That's why a woman, even for half a day, can work somewhere. I'm not talking about when there's little kids at home, but when they're grown up, a woman can at least clean for a couple of hours. And your Pam, for some reason, thinks she's special, raised Olivia at your expense, and now she's putting herself around your neck, Peter. You can't do that. Everything has to be equal. His friend's words hit Peter where it hurt. He knew there was something wrong with Pam, but he couldn't give it up for no good reason. What am I going to tell her? The man thought to himself. Pam, go to work? I've already told her that. She doesn't want to. I shouldn't have started this whole house thing, he lamented. I should have divorced Pam and then started building a house. And I sold my parents' house too. I feel like this house is going to lead to some kind of an end, but what's it going to be, good or bad? A few more weeks passed, and the main work inside the house was done. Peter went from work to pick up his wife. Pam was in no mood to get into his car. Pam, what's wrong? Concerned, he asked. Are you not feeling well? I'm fine, she said sharply. Hurry up, let's go. I'm really tired today. Peter wanted to talk to his wife, but Pam immediately cut off all his questions. I told you I'm tired, that you're hitting on me. Can you leave me alone? She shouted. The man looked at her in bewilderment. He pretended for the nth time that nothing was going on. Finally, the day came when the house was finished. The money from the sale of her parents' house, as they say, was enough to cover it. At least, that's what Pam told her husband. The man was overjoyed. Lately, it had become increasingly difficult for him to be in the same room with his wife. The woman turned her nose up at him and didn't want to talk about anything. Everything was going well, but during the move, Peter and his wife had a scandal. Pam, why are we bringing in the old couch? It's not comfortable to sleep on, Peter exclaimed. I told you to earn money on Shabbos. You didn't want to, so don't even dream of a soft bed, Pam retorted indignantly. But I'll get my paycheck one of these days, so I'll buy a new bed, Peter resisted. And for the fence? Where will we get the money then? His wife shouted angrily. We'll have to borrow it from somebody, you know, Pam, Peter replied. I'll buy my own bed with my own money. And if you want a new gate, go to work, he finally told his wife what he wanted. That's it, the woman's eyes ran with rage. Then I won't move into this house, she threw her things away. Well, don't, Peter didn't expect such an answer from himself. I'll live there myself. The man gathered his things, loaded them into the car, and drove to the house. On the way, he bought himself a cot, which became his only piece of furniture for almost 2 weeks. Pam and her husband did not speak. She realized that she was starting to overplay her hand. What an idiot. Why doesn't he call, she thought. You're going to apologize to me, the wife was angry. But Peter remained completely indifferent to her mental messages. On the contrary, it even seemed to him that he could breathe easier without Pam. He was completely immersed in planning his backyard. He was so preoccupied with it that he forgot about his wife. Peter couldn't take it anymore and called. Have you no conscience at all? I put so much work into this house, and you can't even appreciate it. What did I do? The man was surprised. I didn't want to continue sleeping on the old, uncomfortable sofa, which has already broken my back. That's my ingratitude? Only you've been spending your nights on a very comfortable, soft mattress for a long time, and you don't work anywhere. Peter felt like he had a cork popped out of something, and he couldn't hide his anger that had built up over the years. He was no longer afraid to confront his wife. But I didn't tell you not to buy a bed, the woman resisted. I said not now, and you turned everything upside down. Have I done nothing for you in all this time? The manipulation game is on. Why are you doing this to me, Pam? What am I doing to you? Peter couldn't help himself. Do I demand anything from you? I don't want anything from you at all, he admitted honestly. You can live in my house or not. What's the problem? You see, you've made it look like it's not our house, it's your house, so I don't matter to you, the wife pressed the husband. What a load of crap. Peter wanted to hang up. Did I say that to you? Did I kick you out of our house? Let's move your stuff out of the apartment right now, just without the old couch, okay? Pam cheered up. Then I'll wait for you, the woman's voice changed immediately. Peter called the car, and together with the driver, they loaded it. In general, the man didn't want to take all this junk, so he insisted that all the old furniture and some other things remain in Pam's apartment. The woman fussed contentedly as the men unloaded her furniture. Well, Peter, happy moving in, Mike handed his friend some kind of package. May your new home give your life a new direction, he wished. Thank you, thanked the friend. Sorry, I can't do the housewarming, we need to raise money for a new gate, Peter replied. Yeah, and it's all on you again, Peter? I hope this whole Pam thing ends well, the man sighed. I hope the worst is over, Peter smiled. We already had a fight with her the day we moved in, you know. I even forgot about her for a while, he laughed, but then Pam called and got into it, and I guess she did. His friend looked at him with a smile, just not in your favor again. I don't know whose favor it was, but we made it up, Peter replied cheerfully. I managed to squeeze my old couch out of the new house. God, how many years can you sleep on that crate? You have no idea how uncomfortable it was. I wouldn't be surprised if you inherited it from Aunt Pam, laughs the locksmith. Yeah, his friend echoed his sentiment, and she probably got it from her great-grandmother, so I was wrong to praise him so much. It's a very venerable rarity. If it was so valuable to you, Pam, she'd sleep on it herself. Mike couldn't help himself and said, Oh, really? These things are only for laborers, Peter sighed. She has a very soft bed, by the way. I only have one question, the man looked at him with a sneer. Why is it a single bed? You weren't taken into account there at all. Well, I was always told that in a small apartment, such a bed would not fit, but an old sofa and a single bed can get along. You know what I'm talking about, buddy. Almost a month later, Peter and Pam were living in their new home. They each moved into their own room, so no one seemed to be bothering each other anymore. The woman started doing chores around the house, and the man still did as he traveled to work at the factory. The tension in the relationship between them fell a little, but here was the husband rejoicing. Now everyone is busy with his own business, no one bothers each other, so you can relax a little. The question with the household was not completely solved, and the man was still at the stage of plans, and everything would probably have gone on like that if it hadn't been for one unforeseen incident. Peter, someone has to go to Moscow, right? The director looked pleadingly at the fitter and mechanic. In one person. First of all, you will not go alone. Secondly, you'll get a bonus for all this nervousness. What am I going to do with them? The employee looked at him in shock. You send someone knowledgeable, but what about me? I have no tongue. They'll ask me something and I'll just stand there silent. For the third day, the director tried to persuade Peter to go to Moscow. There was a congress there on some round anniversary. All over the country, there was a cry for one of the best employees of vacuum and X-ray plants to be allocated and sent to the capital. And since there were few such plants in the country, all the scheduled employees were counted. Peter didn't understand at all why exactly he had gotten this privilege. The man was not a particularly talkative person. He had never been in cheerful companies. But Alex insisted that it was he who should have gone to the meeting in Moscow. I gave up on him, Peter complained to his friend Mike. You know everything here better than I do. Why don't you go instead of me? Peter, Alex said, he wrote the application in your name. There's nothing you can do about it now, the man sighed. Before you write your applications, you should ask first. The locksmith couldn't calm down. What am I supposed to do now? Die? What will happen to you? At least, you'll go to see the capital. Mike laughed. The director is paying for everything, and he'll give you a bonus when you arrive, so don't worry. At least, you'll get a change of scenery. Peter had been going crazy for days. He was a homeboy, so to speak, and here's Moscow, and it's almost a 2-day train ride. But there was nothing to do, so Peter began to pack for the road. Peter, I'm so happy for you. Pam was jumping all over her husband. How many days will you be gone? Well, let's do the math, her husband replied grudgingly. 2 there and 2 back and 3 more days in Moscow. Wow, so that's what, a whole week, she rejoiced. At least, don't stay in a hotel there, go to Red Square, there aren't many famous places there. I'd go with you too. I would be so happy if you could go instead of me, sighed Peter. I don't want to go to Red Square or museums, I want to stay at home. The day of departure came. Peter was very nervous. In the morning, he said goodbye to his wife and called a cab. The wait for the train seemed like an eternity. Finally, he climbed into his car and, with a heavy heart, made his way to his seat. The man had a fear of heights, so he could not fly on an airplane. The deputy director, on the other hand, who was to represent the plant with Peter, was scheduled to fly to Moscow the night after tomorrow, so the man on the train had to travel alone. It was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Peter was glued to the window. The man was absolutely terrified. He had only been on a train a couple of times in his life, and that was when they were taken first to and then from the army. He didn't like train travel very much. Excuse me, will you let me have lunch? Heard a voice from upstairs, and I need to stretch my legs because I can't lie down anymore. Yes, please, Peter answered. If you like, I'll leave, he suggested to the stranger. No, not at all, the woman came down. I, on the contrary, invite you to join me. I don't really want to, the neighbor said with pale lips. I'm dizzy from the train, and look at me, the woman said quickly. It hurts here. She started pressing on her head. Yes, you have pressure. I'll help you now. The neighbor quickly took something out of her purse and handed Peter some pills and a glass of water. That's how your cheeks are flushed, she said after 10 minutes. How do you feel? Do you feel better? Yes, the passenger answered and felt a warmth spreading through his whole body. You must have been nervous, the woman suggested. Trains usually give you motion sickness unless it's too hot. Are you a doctor? Peter asked with interest. You brought me to my senses so quickly, he smiled. The woman answered and started to take something out of her bag. So, if you don't want to get sick again, then come join me. I had something with me too, the man realized and went to get his supplies. I'll tell you the truth, I don't like to go to Moscow, sighed the neighbor, taking a bite of pie. I lived there for so many years, and in my old age, I've grown tired of it. Did you work in Moscow? Peter looked at her. Probably in a hospital in intensive care. I'm a former surgeon, calmly answered the interlocutor. And there they all flowed one after another. It's impossible to count how many people you save a day. Honestly, I have a perception that only men work as surgeons. My neighbor fidgeted in his seat. Well, why not? There are women. They are, of course, fewer, but they are there, smiled at her companion. But it's a hell of a job. One has nerves of steel. But mine couldn't take it. I can't even imagine what it's like to save someone all the time, Peter admitted. I couldn't do it. Yeah, it's very hard. Even when you know in your mind that the person couldn't have been saved, it still gnaws at you. You're always thinking you should have done something different. But that's the thing, you couldn't have done it any other way. And you hope for a miracle every time. You know, before I met you, I thought we were suffering at our vacuum plant. But now I realize that we have nothing at all. The passenger's mind was spinning. Well, let's talk about something else then, suggested the woman to change the subject. My name is Lily. I'm going to Moscow, you might say, on business. For several years, I cannot solve the question of housing after the divorce. My husband is always suing me for the apartment. Honestly, he does not want to. We work together, live together. After the divorce, it's all for him. Is that why you left Moscow? That's what Peter said. I'm sorry, I guess it's none of my business. I don't even know what to say to you, the woman said sincerely. I guess it is and it isn't. It's just that I was so tired, mentally and physically, that at one point, I wanted silence. I had no family life with my husband anyway. I didn't have time for children. We never had any. To be a doctor, your life partner has to do something similar, otherwise, you can't live together. I tried for years to combine work and family, but it didn't work out. We just delayed divorce like everybody else. And when we did, I was already 45, you know? I just woke up one morning and realized I couldn't do it anymore. And I quit right away. I used all the money I had to buy a small house in a village not far from the city. I've lived there ever since, and I love it. It's so quiet. Yes, it's a sad story, Peter sighed. To be honest, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Is it necessary to continue to support a family if the love is gone and everyone is living their own lives? No, the woman answered quickly, but you can't come to that theoretically. It's like a light bulb that has to come on, you know? Even the fact that my husband had a mistress could not make me leave him. I think about it now, and I can't understand myself at the time. But I continued to live like that. Not 1 year, but almost a decade. So even cheating can't always be the trigger that pulls the trigger. It's something you have to come to on your own, and everyone has their own timeline. Peter himself didn't understand why, but it was easier for him to speak out to a complete stranger. Lily felt the same way at that moment. The woman knew that they would go out together on the platform in Moscow and would never meet again in their lives. You know, when I moved from Moscow to my village, I had a strong shock. And it wasn't just a question of size. At first, I didn't understand where to put myself. I woke up, and my hands felt as if they were sewing up the incision I had made. I constantly saw myself on the operating table. I wanted to start operating again. I started to find out if a surgeon is needed in the nearest city. And then I suddenly let go, and I clearly felt that I would have to start all over again. You can't even imagine what came into my head. I bought myself a cow, Lily laughed out loud. Oh my God, I can't even remember it. I was afraid to go near it. All the neighbors laughed at me, and I thought that the most difficult thing in life is to conduct operations. But it turns out, milking a cow, oh, how many nerves she got on my nerves then. But the further you go, the more interesting it gets. Once, I was going to make cheese, and I liked this idea so much that I began to dig on the internet all about how cheeses are made. And now, through 3 years later, I'm a cheesemaker. I have not become a professional yet, of course, but still. I eventually sold my cow. My neighbors give me milk, so I and 2 other guys who work for me make cheese from it. That's how my fate turned out. Wow, Peter looked at the woman in amazement. I cannot decide to have a dozen chickens, and you've turned your life around in one fell swoop. Don't you regret it? He looked at her curiously. No, not about Moscow, not about the hospital, not about her husband, she smiled. I'll tell you the truth, right now, I feel happy. I'm just living, not making any special plans, you know? There were so many times when I was fooled, when I didn't get paid. I said to myself, so what? We'll see what happens. And somehow, miraculously, things happened that were much more beneficial to me. One day, we didn't get paid for a whole shipment. Naturally, I was hoping to get my money back from the police, but I didn't. In the end, I had to say goodbye to the whole thing. And exactly a week later, I get a call from a new client with huge requests. We began to cooperate, and there is no more reliable partner for me to this day. We've never let each other down, and he takes from me almost 80% of all the goods. So there is no telling what kind of grief is behind what happiness awaits you with, Lily. The road to Moscow went easily, and Peter did not even notice how they approached the capital. The man helped her carry her things onto the platform. Well, Peter, I'm very grateful for your company. Thank you for listening to me all the way, she laughed. God willing, I'll see you around. And you have a good time in Moscow, she wished her acquaintance goodbye. Lily, I was also very pleased, shook her hand Peter. Thank you for the cordial conversations, for your sincerity. The man hired a cab, just as the director had told him. An hour and a half later, he was standing in front of the entrance to the huge hotel. My God, you can get lost in here, mumbled the man, and I have 3 days to live here. But tonight, he was to be joined by the deputy director. It was still a long wait, so Peter ventured outside. The main thing for me is to show this card in case I get lost. He twirled the cardboard with the hotel address in his hands. After all, I need something to eat, or I'll die here before the evening. The rest of the day was unremarkable for Peter. He even tried not to remember anything. The day after he arrived, his deputy director took him to the subway, which took them a long time to get somewhere. Finally, when they got off, Stefan informed him that they were already there. Then, on the first day, there was some kind of presentation in a large hall. Some people were called up to the stage, and they were given certificates and packages with some gifts. Peter got his and didn't even listen to what the speakers were saying anymore. In the evening, after the Congress was over, a buffet was arranged for the guests, and Peter and the deputy director had a good meal. Here, put this in the bag. Some man came up to Peter. That's what everybody does around here with all this good stuff. Why should it go to waste? The vice principal stuffed something into 2 bags. Peter didn't even look at him. Lily's words about the cheese factory kept running through his mind. The man liked the idea so much that it pushed even the chickens aside. Peter, how about it? Let's go give thanks and go home, Stefan suggested, his cheeks flaming from the alcohol. I've got something else for us in the room, and the bottles in the bag were frowning. The next day, the deputy director couldn't get out of bed. He continued the celebration in the room by himself. Yesterday, Peter refused the free vodka. A few glasses of wine were enough for him. Well, I've seen Moscow, Peter said sadly, looking at the neighboring bed where Stefan was snoring. The man left the hotel and decided to walk around a bit. He was very poorly oriented, so he couldn't take the subway. He wandered around the neighborhood, looking in one store or another, but all his thoughts were always consumed with new ideas. The acquaintance from the train had completely changed his idea of what he could and could not do, or rather, it was more about a person's ability to take everything, drop everything, and start all over again. And even a completely different thing. For Peter, it was something incomprehensible, but it also attracted him. The man felt an inner impulse. After all, I too could give up everything and do something else, it was going through his head. Yes, it will be difficult, I realize that, but the main thing is to go forward no matter what. In the evening, the deputy director came to his senses. He took out the remaining bottles and food and continued to celebrate his arrival in Moscow. He had to leave early tomorrow morning, and Peter was afraid of how he would get up. But to his surprise, Stefan was, as they say, as good as a cucumber. By 8, he was smiling happily. The trip to Moscow had gone well, and he was ready to report it to the director. Peter, you'll take a cab straight from the hotel, and it will take you to the station, he said goodbye. Don't be late, his last words sounded like a mockery. Yes, I've seen Moscow, sighed Peter with annoyance in his voice when his companion left. The man gathered all his things and went to the train station in advance. He was sitting in the waiting room when he thought a familiar face flashed before him. Lily, he shouted and raised his hand. I'm here. He stood up and waved as hard as he could. Wow, the woman said in surprise. I completely forgot that you told me that you would be coming home today, and I failed again. So, I decided not to stay here, and I have a suspicion that you and I will be on the same train again. The interesting thing is, what carriage are you in? There was a sparkle in her eyes. Fourth, was Peter's only reply. What's yours? He held his breath. Is it the same? The woman laughed out loud. She reached into her bag and pulled out her ticket. That's just unbelievable, the man looked at her ticket. Is there such a thing? As you can see, she couldn't calm down. Only now, we're at different ends of the carriage. I managed to get a lower seat, even if it was by the toilet. So, we'll have dinner together tonight. Peter found it easy to talk to his new acquaintance. Maybe it was because she'd been honest from the start. He didn't hold anything back either, but conversations between them were riveting on any topic. Peter, I don't agree with you on this, the woman said, but that's the way it should be. If you and I had the same point of view on everything, what would we have to talk about? But as it is, I see that you don't agree with me, and I'm trying to look at this question from a different angle, and it makes me wonder if it's even possible to look at things that way. It's all so strange to me, the man answered her. All our lives, we have been beaten into our heads that close people, whether husband and wife or friends, should have the same opinion and should not be crossed or denied, or there will definitely be a quarrel. Yes, that's the kind of standards that ruin our lives, Lily smiled. What's the point of living together? What new things can we learn from each other? You know, the best years of our life together with my husband were when we argued endlessly. Of course, sometimes it was absurd, you need balance in everything, but nevertheless, when I expressed my point of view, and he expressed his, we clearly realized that now we had broadened our view on this or that problem, and it was easier for us to solve it. Exactly when we expressed our ideas, we could come to a common opinion, not the other way around. But as time went on, we became very tired, I from my work, and he from his. We stopped seeing each other as an opportunity, that's why William started looking for understanding on the side. I'm by no means saying that my husband is to blame for the divorce, it's just that we took everything we could from each other, and we should have admitted it in time, but we didn't, so we needed an outlet. I got more absorbed in my work, and he started looking for easy romantic relationships. Yeah, if only I had a cat like that, as Uncle Fedor's father said in Prostokvashino, I wouldn't have married you, Peter smiled. And really, if I had looked at life like that before, maybe I would have realized something a long time ago. I'm tired of my own whining. I can't do anything about it. We're all like that, the woman replied. As we have already said, everyone has their own time, some can see it right away, and some have to wait. Do you know what the biggest problem in life is? She asked her interlocutor a question, and seeing that he was embarrassed, she answered it herself. It's lack of patience. We are not able to wait. In order to resist all adversity, we need to develop infinite patience. Think of one example in your life that you didn't want to wait and took action, and then it turned out that there was an even better option, and you missed it because of your impatience. Yes, the man confirmed, it happened many times. Sometimes I think that I did not at all at the wrong time, married, but I was already over 30, and I began to panic. At the time, I thought any good girl would be good for me. I don't understand the word good at all. Lily looked at him with pleading eyes. What? That it's a whole set of things. There can be more than 100 examples of both external and internal. And now the question, do such girls really exist? No, Peter lowered his head. I realize now that they don't. Perhaps the girl you're looking for is more appropriate here? Yes, that's closer to reality, Lily confirmed. I mean, she could also be the kind of girl that we could say is bad. Let's say the girl smokes. Again, I'm not saying that's the way it should be or that it's healthy, but in those 100 points of good girls, stands one of them that she shouldn't smoke, and with that, it overrides everything, and she's automatically bad as hell. But to smoke or not to smoke is a personal matter. At the end of the day, a person is hurting themselves more than they are hurting others, and there's a lot of that craziness out there. Oh, Lily said, Peter in an agitated voice. On the one hand, I'm jubilant inside, on the other hand, I'm blown away. I've never thought about life like this before, but it's really helpful to hear someone else's opinion. That night, Peter hardly slept at all. He kept thinking about what his new acquaintance had told him. It just makes sense not to complicate things, he pondered. Here comes Pam into my life. Not bad, she's not bad, she's just the way she is. It turns out I needed her for something, but what if time has passed and we've done our job for each other? Is there any point in continuing to have a relationship now? I can definitely admit that Pam doesn't love me because it's clear from the way she treats me. So, what's the point? Is there any point in continuing to pursue this? Maybe we've already shown infinite patience with each other, and we can let it go. The man clearly realized that he was coming home a completely different person. Peter realized that he would not be able to break off his relationship with Pam right away, but he would gradually distance himself from her when it could be done painlessly. It would be one thing if she loved me, the thoughts in his head wouldn't stop, then I could live with her for the sake of that love, but dragging an old 100-year-old couch she never wanted to sleep on into a new house just to save money on me, what kind of love could there be? Not working for more than 2 years and hoping I would continue to provide for her, what kind of love could there be here? Lily and Peter talked a lot. It was as if the man was breathing freely for the first time in his life. Quickly, the second day flew by as well, and the man was preparing for his exit. Well, Peter, if you want, come with your wife to visit us, the acquaintance suggested. I'll treat you to such delicious cheese, you'll love it, and that's not bragging. I managed to find an old recipe, it's got this really good cheese. Lily, thank you, you've done so much for me, Peter said cheerfully. Maybe, God willing, we will meet again, he repeated her words. The train moved slowly, and Lily kept waving at the man through the window. He too waved back at her for a long time. I can't believe it, it's like I took a course with a professional psychologist, now I want to live, Peter's eyes lit up with happiness. That's it, I'm going to get myself some chickens, but cheese is kind of something I've been wanting to try to do. I don't have the resources for it yet. I can start with poultry, and then we'll see, he decided to himself. The man went to a car with a cab flag on it and asked to be taken home. How is the capital doing? The grandfather asked the passenger. I was there once 100 years ago, it's probably all changed by now. Pam hadn't known what to do for years when Olivia had lived with them. She had tolerated Peter's presence in her apartment, but after she married him, she couldn't bear to live with him. On the one hand, she wanted to divorce her husband, on the other hand, she was facing a not-so-pleasant prospect. Pam had long wanted to quit her job at the vacuum plant and go to the full support of her husband, but only in Peter she did not see the very thing that women dreamed of for many years. Mom, Uncle Peter is a good man, her daughter once told her. I don't know what you want out of life." The girl did not dislike her mother, but there was never any friendship between them. Therefore, as soon as a reliable guy got in Olivia's way, she immediately married him and moved away from her mother. Pam was actually happy. It seemed to her all the time that Olivia was in league with Peter, that the two of them were oppressing her. This way of thinking was very favorable to her. As it happened, she always looked like a victim in her own eyes, and her husband and daughter were the hated aggressors. To be fair, the woman didn't have any friends, otherwise, she would quickly spread, like a magpie on her tail, stories about all the hardships of her life. And yet, there came a point when Pam realized she had to do something about Peter, and it all began not after she had defiantly quit her job, but at the moment when Peter started to build a house. The woman did not have any special plans, but she clearly imagined that as soon as the construction was finished, she would file for divorce. But the construction took too long, and she had to wait a few more years. How it would have ended, no one knows if Peter hadn't sold his parents' house and hired a finishing crew. That's where it all started. "Pam, you know my job wouldn't let me go," Peter asked his wife the first day the guys were working on the house. His wife refused with all her might. But when Peter put the question to her if Pam wanted to move into their new house, she would have to do the job. With curses in her mind, Pam barely agreed. "Idiot. I'm so sick of you and your house," she hissed to herself. "You're not a real man. Couldn't tell me it worked to let him go. If I were him, I'd have built everyone up a long time ago." But, in fact, Pam herself had worked at the vacuum plant for many years and had never been particularly bold. She never spoke out against the director. With her colleagues, she had never had any arguments, but just silently hated them all. Pavel brought his wife to his house, and she greeted the workers with a disgruntled look. The woman gave everyone an arrogant look and, through gritted teeth, began to explain what they had to do. But when a white car pulled up to the house 2 hours later, and the foreman got out, everything in Pam's life changed. "Good afternoon," he was a tall, handsome man, "and you must be the landlord," Peter said. "His wife would be with us today." "Yes, that's me," the woman was transformed. "Hello, I've already explained the job to the boys, so they've already started." "Well, I'll see," smiled the stranger, and went into the house where the work was already in full swing. The man said hello to his boys and began to give them some instructions, then he returned to the owner of the house. "Well, let's get acquainted. My name is Nicholas," he extended his hand to the stranger. Pam shook his hand, and she immediately felt hot. "It's very nice to meet you. Unfortunately, I can't stay here permanently. I have another job." He looked at the woman in a way that said, "If you have any questions, call me right away. I will come in the morning and in the afternoon to visit." The man turned around and smiled goodbye, and left. Pam stood in front of the yard. For the first time in her life, she met, as it seemed to her then, her man. He had everything going for him: his handsome, muscular body, his mind, his cars, his money. "That's the kind of man I could live with," she thought. "God, he's my ideal man." The woman waited all day for the afternoon to come. Finally, the white car showed up outside the yard again. "Well, how are you doing?" The foreman came into the house. "How are my guys working? Do you like it?" "Very much," was all Pam said. She was staring at him the whole time. "With a boss like you, everything works out." "That's my job." The man looked her hard in the eye. "If we're going to churn out free stuff, then who's going to call us to work? So, quality is our main privilege. It is rare to find such a person who will do everything honestly." Pam complimented him. "Everywhere you look, there's thievery." "Well, I cannot do that." Nicholas smiled with a full mouth. "For me, my reputation is important. Without it, it's nowhere." "Yes, reputation is the most important thing," agreed the lady of the house. "It's like a stamp. If it is not there, then with this person, it's better not to do business." Nicholas was not an easy man. He knew about renovation and construction, but as they say, he also liked to drink and had a special passion for the weaker sex. 3 months ago, his divorce proceedings were finalized. Nicholas's wife, with 3 children, tired of all his outings and mistresses. The man spent more money on maintaining his appearance and his women than on his family. Nicholas was always sure that Kate would not go anywhere from him. But the woman was so tired of his cheating that even children didn't stop her. In essence, Nicholas was once a nobody. He had a bath sheet attached to Kate and did not let her go until she finally agreed to marry him. The girl's father was a foreman. He had already left the construction site for several years and went to make repairs with the guys, so Nicholas found himself under his command. Not to say that he was stupid, but rather lazy. His father-in-law used to chase him around, but after Kate's father seriously fell ill, Nicholas immediately took his place. At first, the guy was cunning and often cheated customers, but when his services began to refuse, Nicholas realized that in this business, so cannot. In the end, he physically stopped working, so then he made it a rule never to offend customers, and after years of scandals with his guys, he finally began to pay them a normal salary. As time went on, Nicholas had money. The man, as they say, began to luxuriate, but not for his family, as Kate had hoped at the time, but for cars, for outfits, for gold rings. Nicholas, enough already, the wife argued with her husband. When was the last time you bought the kids anything? Have a conscience. But I give you the money, the husband arrogantly replied to the wife. We are not poor, so I can at least buy something for myself. You can, but not so often, protested the girl. For some reason, all my salary goes to the family, and I do not buy myself 3 new dresses a month. Kate, come on, I told you to quit your job. Nicholas was throwing arguments. You didn't want to. I did the right thing, shouted Kate. Otherwise, with you going out, we'd be sitting around with nothing. Nicholas, I'm begging you to stop. You stink of women's perfume all the time. One of these days, I can't stand it. And what her husband looked at her angrily. Will you throw me out of the house? I want to remind you that I'm your husband, and we share property. Well, if anything, it's my father's house. Kate couldn't help herself. So don't get your hopes up. You. The husband cursed. He got in his car and drove to his next mistress to improve his self-esteem. And as his wife had warned him one day, Kate couldn't take it anymore. Nicholas didn't expect this from her. He tried to reconcile with her several times, but the woman was adamantly opposed. You always didn't care about us, she shouted. Your whole life revolves around how to please yourself. I hate you. Get out of our house. Nicholas was so self-righteous that he was left in the lurch. First of all, he had no place to live. Secondly, he'd spent everything he'd ever hid from his wife on his mistresses and booze. He only had 1 car left, and that would have been okay, but Kate decided to get back at her husband for cheating. She filed for alimony. What for? Nicholas was furious. She told them about my earnings. Now these BFFs won't get off my back. Despite the fact that Nicholas had a constant job, the man began to get tired of it, and every now and then began to appear about his brigade negative reviews. That the guys that slip up, that the foreman himself began to take more money. In such a state, Nicholas met Pam. The man was an experienced lover with many years of experience, so he instantly recognized that the mistress of the house fell for him. Nicholas usually preferred the young, but in this situation, he needed some perspective. He considered the situation in his mind for a while and decided that Pam was a good one to go with. He'd have to look at her. Nicholas said aloud to himself as he pulled away from Pam's house, if she has a crush on me, it means that she and her husband are not living well. It follows that she can claim this house in a divorce. It's a nice big house, so you could try to get a hold of it. Since she's old, she's definitely over 50, she'll stick with me even if I cheat on her. At that age, they don't care, as long as they don't get left alone in their old age. Yes, the sheepskin is worth it, the man thought, and decided to act. On the second day, the game began. Pam, all dressed up in a beautiful dress, waited impatiently for the foreman. He, in turn, did not fail either. The man arrived in a nice tracksuit. When he took off his outer garment, it was visible how his muscular body played under the t-shirt. God, he's so handsome, Pam sighed. I've never met anyone like him before. Nicholas seemed to read her mind. He tried to pose in all his glory. The man handed a sack to one of the guys or brought a bucket of mortar. Are you going to work with us all day today? The landlady asked him with a smile. Yes, he answered briefly. I've already finished the main work at my other site, so I'll be here to supervise the work. A couple more hours passed, and the man defiantly took his suit jacket and walked over to Pam. I want to bring my boys something for lunch. Let me buy you a treat. He sounded like he was flirting. Nicholas, thank you very much, but I don't want anything. The hostess lowered her eyes. All right then, I'll buy you something of my choice. He did not take his eyes off her. The woman watched the whole way until Nicholas got into his car and drove away. Her heart was racing. God, what kind of man had been pounding in her temples the whole time? Could it really all be true? After a few more days, Pam was convinced that it was all true. For the most beautiful customer in the world held out her bouquet to Pam. Nicholas, let me thank you. It's rare to find women like you. Thank you for being able to appreciate our work. On this day, Pam did not open her eyes from Nicholas all the time, and he from her. So, at lunchtime when the foreman approached her, she was ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. Pam, maybe I don't have the right to ask you this, but would you keep me company today? Nick looked at the woman with dark eyes. Let's have lunch somewhere. Besides, there's something I'd like to say to you in private. The woman quickly grabbed her purse and ran out after him. Her whole body was trembling. They got into the car and drove off. As soon as they were alone on the highway, Nicholas pulled off to the side of the road and began kissing Pam passionately. The woman didn't mind. Pam, you're my destiny. The man broke away from the lips of his beloved. I can't do without you. I can't do it without you either, immediately she answered. Nicholas, you are the dream of my life. It hurts me so much that I have not met you before. Unfortunately, you're already taken. Nicholas knew how to make a woman nervous. Nicholas, I'll do anything for you. Pam pulled him to her. I've been loveless for years. I've been living with my husband. After building the house, I wanted to file for divorce so he's not going to affect our love. Is that really true? Eyes full of passion looked at her foreman. Then you are mine. Do you hear? You're mine. The man started his car, and they drove to some hotel. They stayed there until almost evening and went back happily. By the end of the day, Nicholas sent a parting glance to his beloved and drove away. 20 minutes later, a familiar car pulled up in front of the house. God, I don't want to see him, Pam hissed. Idiot, he's ruined my fun. But anyway, the woman got into her husband's car and drove home in no mood. After the paradise she'd been to today, she associated her husband with hell. As soon as we move in, I'm filing for divorce, the ringing in her ears. I won't live with him anymore. The more Pam's passion with Nicholas heated up, the more she hated her husband. The woman could barely contain herself to continue the game. But every day she was getting worse at it. As it turned out, her Nicholas also had a temper. In fact, the man knew that if everything went smoothly, their relationship with Pam would quickly come to naught. And he was already determined to do just that. So, he occasionally created such situations that a scandal would break out between them. Nicholas always controlled the degree of the latter. The main thing was that they had to fight over the smallest thing and then make up passionately. You lied to me all the time. You said you had no relationship with your husband, Nicholas shouted at the top of his voice when they stopped on the highway. Pam, why are you doing this to me? I love you. Are you hurting me on purpose? Nicholas wouldn't let it go. Do you realize I'd go crazy with jealousy? On the one hand, Pam felt good because it turned out that Nicholas was jealous of her, even if it was of her husband. On the other hand, she at first did not even understand how it was possible to stop the scandal which her lover on an empty place arranged. But the man knew to what point it was necessary to reach to stop Pam. I love you, through tears said Nicholas. "Please don't break my heart." The woman walked over to him and hugged him tightly. She kissed him passionately, and Nicholas pretended to calm down. "Promise me one thing," he pulled the woman away. "You will always be mine alone." "I promise before God," Pam replied, and felt her lover begin to come around. When the renovation of the house was finished, it became clear to her that she would not be able to divorce Peter right away. "Pam, you and I will see each other in secret for the time being," Nicholas suggested. "And in about 3 or 4 months, when everything settles, you can file for divorce." "Nicholas, I don't want to live with him like that." The woman looked at him pleadingly. "I'm sick of his stupidity. I cannot even see him." "But be patient just a little bit more, my dear," Nicholas kissed his beloved. "You just have to prove that you were in this house too, or he'll take it all for himself in the divorce. And I don't need to show my face just yet." In her dreams, Pam saw Nicholas meeting Peter and proving to him who was the master of the house, and her husband squirming in pain and saying he doesn't want Pam or this house, they can have it all for themselves. As long as they just leave him alone all the time. In Pam's mind, Peter was a coward who couldn't fight back. The lovers realized that meeting at Pam's apartment was very dangerous. At first, the woman wanted to put Nicholas there temporarily, but the neighbors of the grandmother who lived next door to her would quickly learn that Pam was going to her tenant's apartment. So Nicholas suggested that he visit her at her new home. He's already been seen there. So Nicholas would just act as a handyman who would finish the renovations in the house. That way, Peter wouldn't have to notice anything, and that's what they did. For the first few months, Nicholas visited Pam twice a week, and once she came to his hotel by herself. Pam's hotel rooms had to be paid for at Peter's expense. The woman had saved some of the money her husband had given her for repairs, so they didn't have enough money for a new gate. And what kind of gift was it to the lovers that Pam's husband had to go to Moscow for a week? "Pam, you know, I feel like I'm living in my own house, lying in bed," Nicholas said. "I really did make it for myself." "It's okay, soon it will be your home," Pam kissed him. "It's only a couple of months away." "I'm going to make such a mess of this place," the man dreamed. "I'm going to put in a hot tub and a pool. We're going to put a barbecue place outside. We'll have green lawns everywhere. Oh my God, it's going to be so beautiful." "Yeah," Pam clapped her hands together in joy. "You're my master," she hugged the man. So during the week, the lovers made their plans for Peter's house. Unfortunately, the latter knew nothing about them. So Peter drove home with his hopes and dreams for his home. The chicken coop and the backyard were clearly in his mind. He also envisioned his cheese factory. The cab stopped, and Peter entered the yard. The man went into the house without delay. The husband was greeted by a disgruntled wife. "What are you doing here so early?" That's all she asked. "How early?" He was surprised. "I told you I would come next Saturday." "Are you leaving?" He looked at his wife. Pam was standing there, all dressed up. She was wearing a new dress, holding a purse. "Yes," she answered briefly. "I have to go downtown on business." "Okay, I got to run." She gave one last nod and walked out of the house. "This is how I am welcomed home," Peter said with annoyance in his voice. "And after that, no one can convince me that this woman has any feelings for me." The man happened to look out of the window and was stunned. He saw a car pull up beside his wife, and she quickly jumped into it. "A cab or something?" Peter tried to find out. "Then why didn't she come to our house?" "Something's wrong here," the man sighed. The landlord strolled hesitantly through the house. He went into the bedroom. The phone rang in his hands, and he shrieked in surprise, dropping it on the floor. The man bent down to retrieve it and found someone's socks under the bed. "What are these?" He pulled them out and began shaking them in the air. Judging by the size, they couldn't be Pam's, and they didn't smell like Pam's either. Oh my God, did she get herself a man? A painful thought echoed in his head. Could it really be true? He couldn't come to his senses that day. Peter hadn't spoken to his wife. Perhaps he was so hurt at the mere thought that Pam might have cheated on him that the man complained about the job to a friend. Peter, it's like they say, Mike sighed, you don't have any direct evidence, so for now, this could all just be a game of your imagination. Mike, how can I check? Shocked, the man looked at him. If she really is cheating on me, how can I prove it, Peter? Well, put a camera in the bedroom, Mike suggested. You want me to help you, just don't let her see it. God, I never thought I'd be spying on my wife, Peter said sadly. Mike, I'm embarrassed by all this. Is it really possible? Maybe, Peter sighed, but there are plenty of stories like that out there. You're the one who's been lying to yourself that your Pam loves you. Yes, I did, Peter realized. I don't want to anymore. You know, you're right. We should just call it a day. I built a house for us. I thought we were going to live there together, and she took it all for granted, didn't even say thank you. I'm so hurt by all this, Peter. It's better now than when it's too late, that's what Mike said. The house was built with your money, so she can't take anything from it. If all this turns out to be true, let her love her, keep her. Now, I'll put a mini camera in the bedroom tonight, coldly said the man. I won't run away from what I have anymore. Cheating means cheating. Why lie to yourself? Peter got home early. His principal had let him go. The man stopped by the store and bought himself a mini camera. Luckily for him, his wife wasn't home, so he installed it easily. The man tried to find the gadget discreetly with his eyes. So now, all that's left is to install the program on the phone. I'll take care of that. Nothing happened for a few days, but then Peter heard something he hadn't wanted to hear all these years. Fortunately or unfortunately, the man had set the camera too high, so he couldn't see everything that was going on. But he wasn't particularly interested in the details of Pam and Nicholas' connection. What mattered most to Peter was what they were talking about. I think in a month, we can start already, Peter heard a man's voice. You know, P, I was thinking if he resists and won't give us the house, then I'll scare him. You're the one who said he's a wimp and he's incapable of anything, so all I have to do is say a few words to him, and he'll give us the house. You could do that, the woman agreed. I know for a fact that no one is behind him, and who needs him? A perpetual loser, she laughed. Then there was a long discussion that envisioned how Pam and her lover would live in this house and how happy they would finally be. Squishy means Peter was tearing up and throwing up. Yes, it was his policy never to lay a hand on a woman, but Pam had no idea that Peter had knocked out more than one of Nicholas's teeth in the army. The man just intuitively didn't tolerate violence of any kind. I'll show him, the locksmith at work was angry. Mike, can you believe they're going to threaten me? Is she stupid or what? I could put her in jail for this, Peter. Thank God you heard what you heard, his friend patted him on the shoulder. I'll tell you something. Revenge is a very nasty thing. It's like a boomerang that always comes back. Teach her a lesson, yes, but don't get back at her, Mike. What I don't understand is what she's counting on, the man resented. The property is in my name. I built the house at my own expense. She has not invested a penny in it. I understand you, but it's a paradox. People like that always think they can get away with anything. You can even give them all the logical proof you want, it still doesn't help, the friend replied. It's like blindness. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, how can I teach them a lesson? The man scratched his head. I've never thought like them. I don't like lies at all. Yes, you don't have to lie to teach them a lesson, Mike looked at the man. I got to think about it. He plunged into his thoughts, and by evening, Mike had an idea. The man walked over to his friend. Peter had been frowning all day. He was more angry with himself than with Pam. He knew perfectly well that he should have broken off the relationship with her the very day his wife began to feel disgusted with him, and that was from the moment they started renovating their house. And how do you envision that? Peter looked at his friend in amazement. Do you really think it's going to work? I doubt it, but I don't, Mike replied. That way, you won't hurt them, and you can teach them a lesson, especially your Pam. Maybe after that, she'll live honestly. Peter thought about what his friend had said all the way home. He was almost to the house, but he turned the car around and drove towards Zarechnoia. Most of the people there were gypsies. "I'd like to hire one of your women for a case," Peter asked a man who came out into the street. "What kind of job?" The man was scared. "You don't have us in any lawlessness," he went back into the courtyard. "I need your fortune teller," the guest shouted after him. "I'll pay you well for the work." "Oh, that," the gypsy was happy and went out into the street. "Well, our rates are not insignificant, so keep that in mind." 5 minutes later, a woman with an insolent face appeared in the street. Peter explained to her what this was all about. "Don't worry, I'll see for myself," she looked at him intently. "But I'll tell you, you're in for a long ride. I see a foreign house, but for you, it will be your home. The woman beside you is happy, oh, how she loves you, and I see you're crazy about her too. Give me your hand." The woman grabbed the guest's hand. "All your sufferings will be over soon, handsome. You've already carried your load, your life will be peaceful, you'll find happiness in your new home." Peter did not believe in all this nonsense, but for a moment, it seemed to him that he felt the same way, especially about the woman who would love him. "All right," he pulled his hand away, "this is for your work, I hope it's enough." He looked at the woman with a smile. "Hey, dear, don't you know that a gypsy is never enough?" She laughed. "All right, I'll go along with you. I'll go along with you. I'll go along with you." The gypsy quickly grabbed the money and stuffed it into the woman's secret stash. Peter didn't fully believe that his event was going to happen. It seemed to him that the gypsy woman would just take his money and not go for the deed. But in fact, things turned out much better than he had even anticipated. Pam, disgruntled, looked out the window. She saw a woman standing by the yard. "What do you want?" she shouted from the porch, clearly recognizing the gypsy woman. "Go away, I won't give you anything." "Oh, beautiful, I don't want anything from you. I came to warn you," suddenly the guest shouted. "It will be better if you listen to me. The higher powers have sent me to you." "What kind of nonsense are you talking?" scolded the hostess. "Get out of my house, or I'll call the police." "Oh, and you're in trouble with your Nicholas," replied the stranger and began to move away from Pam's house. Pam turned pale, she couldn't even move. No one knew she was having an affair. "Wait," she yelled and started to announce herself. "Please, don't go, I'll be right out." Pam jumped outside and ran up to the gypsy woman. She stared at her for a long time. "So, he was telling me the truth," she pointed her finger to the sky. "What's up, Pam? I'll tell you one thing, you shouldn't have gotten involved with Nicholas, you're going to lose everything because of him, and if you want to stay out of jail, you need to dump him now. He's trying to set you up." The gypsy woman wasn't saying what Peter asked her to say. "It's not going to be easy for you to do, he wants something from you, and as long as you have it, he's not going to leave you. Give up what's not yours, and then Nicholas will be out of your life. Pam, you've gotten yourself in trouble because you've been using your husband for years. You need to let him go, what Nicholas wants from you will go with him. Let your husband go, then your lover will be out of your life. Hurry, you have very little time left, otherwise, you'll never get out of this, and you'll go to jail." The guest turned and left, and Pam couldn't move for a long time. Peter asked the gypsy to play a little trick on his wife, but when she saw Pam, she clearly felt that it was serious, so the woman didn't lie and told what she'd seen. Pam ran into the house in tears, she was in complete shock. She tried to piece together what the gypsy woman had just told her. According to her, Nicholas wants something from me, but what and how can he set me up with it? Later the woman thought, he wants what Peter has from me. A thought flashed through her head. Jesus, so Nicholas can take the house away from me and put me in jail, the thoughts raged in her head. No, it's the other way around. He could set me up with someone else, and the house would go to him, she figured it out. Oh my God, where have I gotten myself into? Pam sobbed. She could clearly sense that the gypsy was telling the truth. It took the woman a long time to come to her senses. She realized she had to do something, but what? Pam couldn't figure out what she had to do. I had to get away from Peter, she began to think again, not just leave, but not claim the property, this house, but I'd be left with nothing. Tears rolled from her eyes again. You have very little time, she heard the gypsy woman's words again. I have to decide something. What if it's all a load of crap? Before the woman could think about it, her phone rang. Nicholas' number came up. Pam, hi, it was her lover's gentle voice. So are we going out tonight? I'll be waiting for you at the hotel. Nicholas, do you understand? Unexpectedly Pam said, Peter won't give me any more money. Could you pay for the room tonight? Pam, what's the matter with you? Nicholas's voice changed immediately. You know I don't have a dime right now. If Kate hadn't filed for property division, of course, I'd be happy to, but since we had the house on credit, and we borrowed, she put it all on me. You idiot, I'll have to work for free for the next 5 years. Nicholas, I'm sorry, but then we can't make it tonight, Pam said in a cold voice. I don't even have money for a cab. Well, as you wish, the man said indifferently and hung up. Stuffed up fool, in anger shouted Nicholas, I spent so much effort on you. Why do I need you, old woman? If it weren't for your house, I wouldn't even look in your direction. Pam couldn't move. The woman kept thinking that everything she had just heard was just a dream. Did he not care about me at all? She finally came to her senses. What does he expect? That he would live in my house and I would feed him, she said in shock. For the first time, Pam began to realize the true motives of her lover. The woman could hardly believe it all, but judging by the fact that he also accused her of not being able to come to his hotel, or rather that Pam couldn't pay for it, it was clear that Nicholas didn't love her. Nicholas sensed something amiss. Pam, he dropped his mask for a moment, and Pam could see his true face. A couple of hours later, the man regained his senses and called his mistress again. Pam, are you okay? He purred. I'm so sorry we won't be able to meet today. I don't know how I'm going to make it to Friday. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I was just so mad at myself that I couldn't pay for a hotel room, but for some reason, Pam didn't fully believe Nicholas anymore. The woman decided to talk to him on Friday. She was looking forward to this meeting. Nicholas, tell me honestly, do you love me? Pam looked him straight in the eye. I can't do without you. The man grabbed her and started kissing her. I can't do it without you either. Then it must not matter to you what happened. It came into the woman's head from somewhere. Nicholas, I don't want to hide it from you. What is it? Nicholas woke up. Are you sick? Maybe you're pregnant. It happens at your age too. Peter's leaving me. It finally occurred to Pam. He wants to file for divorce himself, but that's such good news. The lover's eyes lit up with joy. It means we'll soon have the house to ourselves. That's the problem, the woman sighed. He won't give it to me. He said he would only give me a share. What share? The man jumped up. Pam, no way. You've lived with him for years. So I need to talk to him. He does it all through a lawyer, the mistress sighed. So it's official, Nicholas. What do we care? You love me, and I love you too. How big a share? Nicholas wouldn't listen to her. Would he give you even half? No, more than 20%, Pam said. I haven't invested anything in this house, and that's the max. I'm probably talking about 12 to 15%. 12%, the foreman's head snapped up. Pam, how can you live on that? But I have my own apartment. We can live there. Pam did not give up. I thought we would sell it and invest in our house. The man looked at her unhappily. What did you think we were going to use to build a hot tub, a pool? You know that I give all the money I earn for debts. But that's not the point. The woman gathered what little hope she had. The important thing is that we love each other. You're mine, and I'm yours. Yeah, the man got dressed quickly. Okay, Pam, I got to go because I have an emergency today. I'll call you later. As Nicholas drove away, Pam sobbed at the top of her voice. The woman could clearly see that Nicholas didn't want her. Everything the gypsy told her was true. I'm just like that old woman, left with a broken trough, she said out loud. I shouldn't have played Peter. I'd used him for years, so now Nicholas was in my life, and he wouldn't spare me. He would have framed me for some bogus claim, and I'd be in jail for nothing, and he'd be living in my house happily ever after with some mistress. By late afternoon, Pam had made up her mind. The woman sat in the kitchen, waiting for her husband. Finally, his car pulled up outside the yard. "Hello, Peter," she got out to meet her husband. "We need to talk to you." The man was very troubled. He wanted to tell his wife himself. "Peter, I want to apologize to you," the wife said suddenly. "It's very hard for me to admit it, but I'm going to do it anyway." "Peter, I'm sorry, but I never loved you. I'm ashamed, but I've lied to you all these years. I've used you, and I don't want to go on using you. I don't want your house or any of your possessions. I just want to divorce you." Peter was really taken aback. He thought Pam would beg him for mercy, but for the first time in her life, the woman had the courage to stop playing around. "All right, fine, I'll settle for a divorce," was all the husband said. He didn't feel like picking through the dirty laundry and finding out about Pam. It was enough for him that his wife admitted that she never loved him, and that was the most important thing for him. The divorce went through quietly, without any problems. Peter helped his wife move her belongings back into the apartment. The woman didn't mind. They said goodbye without emotion, too, and each went their separate ways. "Mike, I still don't believe that I divorced Pam," the man confessed to his friend 2 months later. "You know, it's kind of empty. It's not that I regret it. I just need time to get used to the new lifestyle." "Maybe, you don't have to get used to it." Mike winked slightly. "You're a good-looking guy. We'll get you married." "No," Peter protested. "I've had enough of what I haven't seen." "Well, your Pam's not the end of the world," objected Mike. "You just need to meet a good woman, as a good friend of mine says." "What at that?" Peter laughed. "There are hundreds of parameters to match. What kind of acquaintance?" My partner was surprised. "You didn't tell me something. Who's the mysterious stranger?" "Her name is Lily. We rode the train together," Peter told him, "and the interesting thing is, we got on the train back from Moscow together too. Maybe it's fate." "Is she married?" Mike's eyes sparkled. "How is she? Is she pretty?" No, yes." Peter laughed at the top of his lungs. For some reason, it felt good to think of Lily. "That's the short of it. But, what's the matter?" "I don't recognize you at all. Like a good woman, you don't pay any attention to her, and when she's a piece of crap, you chase after her." A friend was cursing. "Lily is a former surgeon, but she left Moscow after her divorce from her husband." Peter continued his story. "She makes cheese now. She has her own mini cheese factory." "So you know where she lives?" Mike threw down his tools. "Come on, spit it out." "I know," the man replied briefly. "She invited me and my wife to her place. She promised me some delicious cheese." "Come on, it's not serious. Besides, I don't want any more women." "Well, let's see how you feel in a year." "That's all my friend said." "You think you're the only one going through a divorce?" "Wait a bit, at least. Now I'm not ready for any new relationship," Peter protested. In fact, he had to be said that Peter had forgotten about his meeting with Lily. He couldn't even start his household yet. The man, after the whole story with his wife, was in a very unusual state for him. He kept reaping the old and tried to let it go, but he has not succeeded so far. Maybe he should really go to Lily's house and see her cheese factory, Peter thought, and get a change of scenery for a while. "I'm so stuffy here. Everything about Pam reminds me of her infidelity." After a month, Peter finally made up his mind. He was on vacation, and the man didn't know what to do with himself. He first decided to buy chickens, but then postponed it until he returned. When they said goodbye to Lily, Peter didn't really want any information about her, so he didn't have her phone number. As they said goodbye, Lily shouted her address to him and invited him to visit. Well, if she's going to kick him out, she's going to kick him out after all, Peter thought. In the evening, he took the train, and the next morning he was already there. Now he had to get to the village where Lily lived. The closer he got to the village, the more excitement flared in his chest. Why am I so worried? He wondered to himself. Well, if it doesn't work out, I'll turn around and drive back, the man calmed himself. When he arrived, Peter quickly found the right house. As soon as he mentioned the cheese factory, they told him where it was. The man approached a small house, but behind it, he noticed a large building. It must be her shop, a thought flashed through his mind. Yeah, she's got a nice place, he smiled. Peter walked over to the fence and pressed the bell. He didn't have to wait long. After about 5 minutes, the gate opened, and Lily, in a large apron, came out to him. She looked surprised at first, but then she smiled and opened the gate wide. Well, it's a pleasure, come on in. Yes, I see you've done a good job, Peter whistled. It's all very well done, thank you. You're about to see it now. I've got work to do, so I'll put you down for 2 hours while the boys and I finish the cheese batch. Peter watched the process with such pleasure that he wanted to try it himself more and more. Finally, he couldn't stand it any longer, rolled up his sleeves, and joined the process. Lily put a long apron on him, and the process began. Peter didn't even notice how quickly the time flew by. The man was so absorbed in the work that when Lily told him they were finished, he couldn't believe it. Wow, the guest said with admiration, Lily, what a pleasure it is. I was just floating with happiness. Honestly, I'd like to do cheese too, that's why I came to you, and now after I tried it, I can say with full confidence that it is mine. The woman laughed happily, her hair falling out from under the shawl, and in her eyes flashed sparks. I understand, I'm like that myself, I can't explain to anyone what a pleasure it is. I guess I've found myself in this business, replied the hostess. Well, now for a delicious dinner, you deserve it. The hostess and her guest entered the house. Despite its small size, it seemed very cozy to Peter. Do I need much for myself? She read his mute question. And it takes a lot of time to maintain a big house, I can't afford it. We're busy every day, we rotate weekends. I like your place very much, the guest said frankly. You have a very special atmosphere, God, it's really like that. Peter took a bite of Lily's cheese. My God, what they sell at the store. After you taste real cheese, you don't want to eat any more of this crap. I was also shocked at first and could not understand why Russian cheese in the store always has different tastes, the landlady laughed. No, I do not argue that there is never an identical flavor even in one kind of cheese, but to have such a contrast, it's like you're being handed something different every time. It's okay, I'll give you a taste of real Russian cheese, now you won't mistake it for anything else. Peter felt like he was in a completely different world, everything seemed strange to him, and Lily was completely different from other women. She gave off a warmth that he had never felt before. Peter spent 3 days at Lily's, which completely changed his life. The man fell madly in love with cheese and more, it was as if new possibilities had opened up in front of him. He and Lily talked a lot all those days and couldn't seem to get enough of each other. They talked about everything, and Peter noticed that he could think differently. The man saw clearly that he had had some kind of inferiority complex all his life. He thought he wasn't smart enough, but after talking to Lily, Peter realized that he could easily understand her thoughts. He caught everything on the fly. The mistress didn't even expect to have such a savvy student. Peter, you have a natural instinct, Lily marveled. It's as if you feel the nature of things, you think. He looked at her in amazement. And I always thought that intelligence was not my element. It's a load of crap. I mean, look at you. You can grasp things on the fly. All you have to do is explain it once, and you're already doing the job right, the woman replied. After that trip, Peter blossomed. They returned Lily's calls every night. It was Peter's first experience that a woman could be a friend. It encouraged him so much that he began to share all his ideas with Lily. But very soon, the realization came to him that it wasn't enough for him, so Peter went to visit Lily once more. Not that the woman didn't mind, she was waiting for him. After the second trip, Lily and Peter realized that there was more than just friendship connecting them, and since it was mutual, Peter did not delay with the proposal. I told you so, Mike laughed at his friend's news. You just have not met real women. I'm very happy for you, Peter. Believe me, you deserve it. Peter and Lily sighed quietly and went about their business. Peter sold his house, and they were able to expand their production. Over time, the couple hired a few more people, and the cheese factory reached a new level. Peter, try this one, the wife offered a piece of cheese to her husband. They can make cheese, oh my God, It's unbelievable. Yes, Lily, the Italians have been doing it for years. What can I say? Peter was happily inspecting the cheeses. Finally, the couple's long-held dream came true, and they traveled to Italy and France to taste their famous cheeses. They really hoped that they would be able to realize something after the trip in their cheese factory. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.